September 5th, 2006. Facebook introduces Newsfeed, a near-endless stream of posts showing what friends are sharing and doing every time they log in.
We wanted to make Newsfeed the actual conduit for interactions on Facebook. We understood that engagement was one of the health metrics of the business. If the product's not engaging people on a daily basis, it's not likely to be a thriving business.
February 9th, 2009. Facebook introduces the like button, allowing people to easily express interest in a status update, story, link, or advertisement.
The like button acted as a social lubricant. It actually increased the likelihood of a comment, and it became like a driving force for the product.
The like button is implemented on third-party websites, enabling targeted advertising on and off Facebook to grow to unprecedented proportions. Facebook's ad revenues and profits soar. Mid-2013. The Internet Research Agency, a Russian propaganda organization, is founded in St. Petersburg.
Can you explain what is the Internet Research Agency?
It's a company that creates a fake perception of Russia.
Was the main intention to make the Ukrainian government look bad?
Yeah, that's what it was.
The Russian propaganda had its intended effect, helping to sow distrust and fear of the Ukrainian government.
Russian propaganda was massive on social media. It was massive.
There was so many stories that started emerging on the Facebook. Crucified child by Ukrainian soldiers, which is totally nonsense.
It got proven that those people were actually hired actors.
Complete nonsense.
But it spreads on Facebook.
So Facebook was weaponized.
The Internet Research Agency begins targeting the U.S. in an effort to subvert and misdirect the American public on political and cultural matters.
By 2016, Russia was continuing to use social media as a weapon. And division and polarization were running through the presidential campaign.
June 2016. Traces of foreign malicious activity are noticed by Facebook's internal security. Alex Stamos, Facebook's chief of security, puts a team together to search for evidence of Russian tampering.
So Russia's disinformation activity stretches well before the US election. One of the issues that we figured out later is that nobody in our companies or in the government was tracking the disinformation groups. So on these traditional hacking groups that do offensive activities, you have this interplay in this partnership, but we didn't have that on the fake news groups or the groups like the Internet Research Agency.
We didn't anticipate that foreign actors would use Facebook to coordinate a campaign to influence an election. That, again, wasn't like a high-level priority for us. It wasn't a scenario that we had really considered. Instead, we were much more focused on how do we make this product universally available.
Really what the Russians are trying to do is to find these fault lines in US society and amplify them, and to make Americans not trust each other, and to reduce the ability of people to interact positively online. So they would create, for example, a pro-immigration group and an anti-immigration group. And both of those groups would be almost caricatures of what those two sides think of each other. And their goal of running ads were to find populations of people who are open to those kinds of messages, to get them into those groups, and then to deliver content on a regular basis to drive them apart.
There were these anti-patterns that started to emerge when the bulk of a person's community reflected an ideology or a set of inputs that are specific to that community, and that just kind of squeezed out or left little room for information outside of what that community sees and believes.
The components of Facebook that are most relevant to this issue are the news feed and the algorithm that powers what people see. All the fake news purveyors, including the Internet Research Agency, figured out that it's very powerful to get people to reshare content. You have a couple of million people who wanted to see the IRA content. They didn't know it was coming from Russia, but they intentionally signed up. They reshared the content constantly. And so from that small group of a couple million people, you end up with 135 million people seeing it. The newsfeed algorithm, because you were friends with that person and you interact with that person, was making that something that would come up a lot in people's feeds. And that was something that was being exploited by both the financially motivated fake news and by the government actors.
Were you kind of pointing out to these product people that there's an inherent flaw in their design?
A lot of people came to the same conclusion. How did this one piece of fake news make it into people's news feeds? And the fact that there was this amplification factor that was exploiting how the algorithm worked was one of the issues.
November 8th, 2016. Donald Trump is elected president of the United States.
Following Donald Trump's victory, Facebook is coming under fire by critics who say the social media site played a dangerous role in the election by feeding people fake news about the candidates.
You know, I've seen some of the stories that you're talking about around this election. You know, personally, I think the idea that fake news on Facebook influenced the election in any way, I think, is a pretty crazy idea, right? And it's
Early 2017, Alex Stamos submits report on Russian interference. Facebook officials remove all mentions of Russia. September 6th, 2017. Facebook discloses that the Internet Research Agency spent $100,000 on divisive advertisements.
The first reaction from Facebook, of course, was, oh, you're crazy. Nothing's going on. Well, we find yesterday there actually was something going on. And I think all we saw yesterday in terms of their brief was the tip of the iceberg.
September 27th, 2017. Zuckerberg walks back his previous comment that it would be crazy to think that Facebook influenced the election. October 2nd, 2017. Facebook initially discloses that 10 million people viewed the fake Russian ads. October 30th, 2017. In written testimony submitted to the Senate Judiciary Committee, Facebook revises their initial estimate of the number of affected people. They now believe 126 million people were shown either the ads or fake news posts in their news feed. January 4th, Mark Zuckerberg makes a post stating that his New Year's resolution for 2018 is to fix Facebook.
Mark Zuckerberg's New Year's resolution is to fix Facebook. He writes in a post, "We currently make too many errors enforcing our policies and preventing misuse of our tools."
Facebook has a lot of work to do, he wrote, whether it's protecting our community from abuse and hate, defending against interference by nation states, or making sure that time spent on Facebook is time well spent.
I don't want anyone to use our tools to undermine democracy.
Zuckerberg spent much of 2017 on the defensive. He initially dismissed the idea fake news on Facebook helped elect President Trump as, quote, crazy, but then was forced to backtrack.
Our teams have found and shut down thousands of fake accounts that could be attempting to influence elections in many other countries.
Mark Zuckerberg apologizes numerous times for Facebook's security issues and for abusing its users' trust.
We didn't take a broad enough view of what our responsibility is.
We didn't take a broad enough view of our responsibility. We need to take a broader view of our responsibility.
It's not enough to just give people a voice.
It's not enough to just build powerful tools.
We have to make sure that people are not using that voice to hurt people or to spread disinformation.
We need to make sure that they're used for good.
And that was a huge mistake. It was my mistake.
And that was a big mistake. And it was my mistake. And I'm sorry.
The integrity of our elections is fundamental to democracy around the world. Now, while I was out on leave, I spent a lot of time with our teams on the issue of Russian interference in the US elections. Now, I wish I could tell you that we're going to be able to stop all interference, but that just wouldn't be realistic. We can't prevent all governments from all interference, but we can make it harder. We can make it much harder, and that's what we're going to focus on doing.
April 11th, 2018. Mark Zuckerberg is called to testify before Congress.
We face a number of important issues around privacy, safety, and democracy. Facebook is an idealistic and optimistic company. But it's clear now that we didn't do enough to prevent these tools from being used for harm as well.